Bernd Harmele, it's a pleasure meeting you in London.
Nice for having me here. Thank you.
When we met in May in Malmo, we probably expected some sort of eruption because of the situation in the West Bank and Gaza, but it never occurred to us that the eruption would be as stunning as we have seen. And when on the 7th of October, were you here in London or still in Sweden?
No, I saw this from Sweden, yes.
From Sweden.
Yeah.
What was the reaction there generally?
In Sweden, mixed.
As everywhere.
Yeah, mixed.
And of course, as we record this today, we don't know what's likely to happen.
No.
Though last evening there were reports of skirmishes and actual exchange of fire in the battlefield, on the ground, while the bombardment continued. Many people expect that there will be a ground invasion quite soon. Do you expect that too?
I don't know. I can't look into the future, first of all. And I'm not an expert on politics or military thinking. I'm an author, and I can't help you with that. Well, I can say this much: it's not unlikely that there will be an invasion on the ground.
Well, you wrote a book about Nakba.
Yes, I did.
That was the first Nakba.
Yeah.
The Israelis have been threatening to exact a second Nakba.
Yeah.
Although, to be frank, really, the Palestinians have seen several Nakba.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that because this book is, of course, about the Nakba 47 to 49, but also the ongoing Nakba as we see it, 56, 67, I don't have to lecture you on this, 73, the Gaza wars, and now. So it's an ongoing Nakba.
It's an ongoing Nakba.
Which makes it very different from all other wars that we've seen.
Now, when I met you in Malmo, I was really touched by your personal experience, by your story.
Yeah.
Now, you were born to Jewish parents.
Yes, I was.
But you grew up to have some sort of a disagreement with at least your mother, if I understand, on the issue of Palestine.
Yeah, but that was much later. I grew up in a Zionist. My father was an atheist. My mother was a religious person. Both were Jews. So it was some kind of interesting mix in my upbringing.
How did they manage to stay together?
At home, it was her house rules. So we kept kosher, and we didn't light electricity or stuff like that for Shabbat. But when my father was out and about and doing his business, he was a businessman, I'm sure he ate pork and whatever he needed to do to make business, So he was a flexible guy. My mother, but both of them were Zionists, raving, very strong feeling. And for the first 20 years, it was my upbringing and it was natural. I didn't question it that much, but eventually, I started thinking and reading and talking, and we didn't have any fights, my mother and I, but we didn't agree.
Was there a certain point in your life where you made that conversion?
No, it was a gradual thing, I would say. There was something in my back of my head that was said, this can't be right. 750,000 people can't leave their homes for 2 weeks and then expect to come back. There's something in this story that doesn't make sense. And I eventually became a journalist. So that trade is partly a fact-finding trade. You have to check your sources and so on. And eventually I started feeling... I read a book from a friend of mine that's called The Lost Land. And that was an eye-opener, but this was only 25 years ago, something like that. I'm 70 now, so I'm a slow learner. But
since then, you've been seen or perceived as a supporter of the Palestinian people's...
Yeah, I'm a supporter for peace. I'm a supporter for justice. I'm against war. I'm against oppression. It's not about Jews and Muslims or Israelis or Palestinians. I don't like when people are being killed, civilians are being killed, be it by Israeli army or the Hamas. that's not for me.
Well, we all prefer peace and, and calm and people coexisting together.
Yeah.
But
I also believe in justice.
Yeah,
so that makes it a bit more complicated, of course.
I mean, the lack of justice is what causes this to continue.
Yes, and lack of context and so on. You know, you have to go back and acknowledge what really happened. You know, not fairy tales, not from the Bible, not from the Zionist fairy tale. You know, a land without people for a people without land. That's a fairy tale. It's not.
Well, you see, for me, growing up as a young Muslim, I really thought it was something to do with the Jews. Until I came to this country in my early 20s, started reading more about the history from different sources. And then later on, when I was doing my PhD in the 90s, really expanding my vision. And now I can very clearly see with absolute certainty that it's not a war between the Muslims and the Jews. No. It's simply a reaction of an indigenous population to a foreign invasion.
Yeah, it's a political question,
it is.
Not a religious.
It is.
So
now, what touched me really in your story is what happened to your mother.
Yeah.
So, if you don't mind, I'd like our viewers also to hear the story.
It's short but not so sweet. She was a tourist. She went to Israel first with my father for many years. For Passover, because if you're an Orthodox Jew, you have to change all the household during the Passover. And my mother was a bit lazy, so she went to Israel, and she could have the Passover without the work. So that was good. Then my father died. Then she continued going to Israel for Passover. And this specific year was 2002. She was staying in the Park Hotel in Netanya.
When Passover? When is it?
In the spring.
In the spring.
Yeah, just like the Christian Passover.
Oh, this is like the Easter holiday.
Easter, exactly. Okay. It moves a little bit because of different calendars, of course. And at that time it was quite. There was a lot of suicide bombing going on in Israel, Palestinian suicide bombers, right? So at this.
That was during the Second Intifada.
Yeah, this is 2002. I think that's the Second Intifada.
Yes.
And she was unlucky to be in that hotel that night when a Palestinian suicide bomber from Tulkarem entered the lobby and blew himself up and killing 30 people. One of them was my mother.
And then because of that, you did something. There was a project, I remember you told me, you embarked on.
Yeah, 3 years after this, I mean, for me, it's a shock, of course, losing your mother in this way. But for me, for 3 years, I couldn't really deal with it emotionally. I couldn't deal with it. It was just a lid. It was closed. It was quiet. I kept on working as a journalist, basically. But after 3 years, I woke up early one morning and I said, I want to do a TV documentary. And you have to keep in mind, I was a newspaper man for 30 years. I knew nothing about TV at that time. But I wanted to do a TV docu, and the title should be My Mother Was Killed by a Suicide Bomber. I had this 5 o'clock in the morning, completely clear. And this is to the day almost 3 years. And usually as Jews, I'm not an obedient, I'm a secular Jew, but it doesn't matter. You have this grieving period of 12 months. I guess a lot of religions have that.
12 months?
Yeah, 12 months. 1 week staying in the house, doing nothing, that's the Shiva. Then you have the Shloshim, that's the 30 days. Then you don't go partying, you don't go dancing, you don't go doing fun stuff, you don't go to the cinema. Then you have 11 months of where you go to say the Kaddish prayer over the dead. You do that once every Saturday. Yeah. And after 12 months or after,
that's a very long period, by the way. I mean, in Islam, it's just 3 days.
Okay.
But for the widow,
yeah,
it's 40 days.
But we keep on for 11 months. After 11 months, you raise the stone on the grave. You bury. Jews and Muslims have the same tradition of burying very quickly, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. But after 11 months, you put up the stone. Then, if you have a block, you go around the block symbolically, and then that year is over of grieving. For me, I thought after 3 years, my period of grieving is over. So I started on this project. I called a TV station that I knew the guy, and they sent me. After 2 weeks, I was down working first in Israel proper, if you like, and then in Tulkarem.
They sent a cameraman with you?
Yeah, and a fixer, and an interpreter, and everything. And we went over to the suicide bombers' family to interview them, but not as the son of one of those who got killed, but as a Swedish journalist. So from the beginning...
Oh, you didn't tell them?
No. I was there undercover. And eventually on camera, I'm telling first the brother and then the father of who I am. And my idea was, you know, why don't I feel hate? I felt sort of, you know, why don't I hate these people? So I was thinking maybe I can find out through this documentary, through this work, through meeting them. Maybe I will hate them, maybe I will not, I don't know. And I sort of wrapped it up as trying to have a dialogue, like your TV channel, Dialogue, right?
Yes, Al-Hiwar.
Yes. But I set it up in a way that dialogue wasn't possible for them, because I came into their house as a journalist and I went out as the son of someone that their son killed. So it was
shocking for them, wasn't it?
It was shocking, of course it was. It was quite aggressive from my part. But that was, at that time, what I was able to do. That was the best idea I had at that time. Now when I look back on it, it wasn't such a great idea.
So you started talking to them as a Swedish journalist, asking them what they thought of what happened.
And listen to them and listen to them.
And then you told them, I'm the son.
Then the father suddenly says, then he says all of us, you have to understand, we're not after the Swedes or the French or the Germans, it's the Jews, he says to me. So I said, but my mother was Jewish. So that's when my bomb exploded in his. It was some kind of a revenge, not very pretty, to tell you the truth. But that was the best that I could do. This is 2005. And then I've been thinking about this for another almost 20 years.
Wow.
And that's where this project comes in, the Nakba book. That's sort of a closure for me to do.
Before we talk about the Nakba, still with that project of yours,
yes.
Did you establish some sort of a relationship with that family afterwards, or was it the one and the last?
They were very shocked. I went and cut my hair in Tulkarem and went into a barber just by chance, and I immediately felt a sympathy between the two of us. And this family of the suicide bomber was Hamas, politically. This barber, I understood later, was Fatah. So he was a gentler sort of person. So for some reason, he invited me home for coffee the next day, and I went. And I had bought a map in Tulkarem with where Israel usually is. It was Palestine. It was a map of Palestine.
The whole thing.
Yeah, the whole thing. So I tricked him a little bit. We had a nice talk, and he was very sympathetic. And then I showed him this map. Will you put it on your wall in the kitchen, on camera?
So you took it to them as a present.
No.
No.
I thought, look, I bought this map. I want to show you. And I wanted to ask him, if you had this map, would you put it on your wall? So I tricked him a little bit, or provoked him. And he was very smart. He said, I want to put this map up, or I can put this up, I can put the 67 map up, I can put the 48 map up from 46 and all the way to the Turks, right? So there are many maps that I can put up. So he put me back in my place, It was a very good answer. So we had a very good rapport, maybe you can say. But we never spoke after that. I think I sent the documentary to him, but I never heard anything from him. But.
Now, when you told them your mother was Jewish, and that stunned them, maybe. I think when they said to you, we are not after the Swedes,
the Europeans,
we are after the Jews.
Yeah.
The problem is that because the Israelis claim to be Jewish, the Arabs call Israelis Jewish.
I understand this now after talking to 75 Nakba survivors. I understand this distinction, and it's a mix-up, between everyone. At that time, I didn't understand the distinction. I could have, if I had been more, and you know, my battery, my mental battery was down to 10% at that time, you know. First I'd done the long interview with the son the day before, and I was sitting with the father, and I was really sort of not passing out, but close. So I could have asked them, oh, do you mean the Jews or do you mean the Israelis? But I didn't, because I wasn't aware of that mix-up. Today I would have been more, today I would first of all not go there without presenting myself as who am I. So
Yeah,
that was not...
it's really very regrettable, but this is really the product of the Zionist project. Because prior to Zionism, Jews lived in much of the Arab world
I know.
in peace.
I know. I have stories here where they tell me they started talking about Palestinian Jews or Arab Jews,
Yes.
or our neighbors were national Jews, and then, oh, what? I never heard these expressions before. So what are the ones that came, the survivors? No, they're European Jews. And that's when our problem started, when the Zionists and the European Jews came to Palestine. With the national Jews, with the Arab Jews, with the Palestinian Jews, we didn't have. We were living together.
I recently interviewed Avi Shleim about his memoirs. Brilliant. I read his memoirs, and I really, at certain moments, I wept.
Why? At what moments?
Because of the loss that we incurred of that historic coexistence.
Right.
Between the Jews as a religious community, which was an integral part of the Arab mosaic, Muslim mosaic.
Of course.
One may say.
Yeah.
And it was shattered, it was lost.
Yes.
Now, we come to the story of the book.
Okay.
Nakba.
Yeah.
Where did the idea come from?
The idea, little context, I started writing books maybe 15 years ago, and then I was finished with the project about Swedish Jews during the Holocaust, and I left that to the publishing house. Then my wife, which is a much smarter person than I am, she said, what now? What will you do now? Because if you will become restless and you will start climbing my walls. I don't want that.
She wants you to remain busy.
Yeah, you have to keep on doing stuff. Okay, what should I do? You should start a podcast, she said. I didn't know anything about podcasts. Okay, what should it be about? It should be about survivors from the Holocaust. So that was her idea. And I did that. And it became a podcast with 120 interviews or talks, long talks. It could be, the longest was up to 7 hours.
Online or in a radio station?
Online.
Online.
I published it on SoundCloud and Spotify and all over. And that became a book like that one, but survivors. And then someone contacted me that I knew a little bit. I actually was a friend of his brother. He said, I would like you to do a podcast, but this time about the Nakba. So that was his idea. He sponsored the whole project, so I could start working with it. And from that part, and that became like 75 interviews in Sweden, and in Lebanon, in Jordan, and on the West Bank, and Israel proper.
So you traveled widely to do it?
All over. And I would have liked to go to Gaza, but there wasn't enough time, and it's a bigger thing, as you know. And that became this book. So it started with an idea from a friend. First it started with an idea from my wife, then from a friend. So I'm good in picking up other people's ideas. I realize a good idea when I see it.
Now, having done this book and having gone through a personal experience, do you really see a change outside Palestine, Israel, outside that region, where bridges are being built between the communities?
I understand your question. I have to, can I give a personal answer to that question?
Please.
Because I see a change in myself. You know, that's where it starts for me. You know, if I can change myself, that's good enough. And maybe other people can see that and be inspired by it or resent it or whatever. But I'm not busy with building. I try to build a bridge within myself, so to speak, to sort of accept what can't be accepted, to fix what can't be fixed. I mean, my mother she's dead. So that can be fixed. But I have to make it into something fruitful, let's say. Not positive, perhaps, but at least some kind of sense. And for me, it was actually my daughter coming to getting ideas. She said when I had the book release, she said, "Daddy, do you think this book is some kind of closure for you for what happened to grandmother?" She said. And well, that's very nice of you to say.
Asking about the Nakba book.
Yeah. And I didn't think about it. I told her, but I may think you're right. Then I started to, now I do programs from that idea that this is some kind of closure for me, only for me, or maybe for my family, let's say. And the funny thing is I looked up a post I did on Facebook 3 years ago when I started this. Then I wrote, maybe this can be some kind of closure for me, but I forgot about it. And my daughter brought that idea back. So everything is sort of wrapping itself up in a nice way. And, I'm not a salesperson. I don't sell my views. I don't want anyone to buy my views. I don't want to put my worldview onto someone else, not to you, not to anyone.
But you're a writer, you're a journalist. So
Yeah, but I
I
write for myself, foremost. I can understand that this can be a good thing for others, but I'm preoccupied with fixing my own life. So that's when you give me questions about politics and this and that. I mean, I could express things, but I'm not really that interested in that part of humanity. I'm interested in humanity.
Maybe in terms of expression, but deep
Yeah.
within you must be affected by political events.
Of course, but some things that are very hard to talk about, you can sometimes shut up, really. I don't always need to express this and that about what happened October 7th, because it's just a disaster, what we do to each other, and I really can't stand it. So Wittgenstein, the philosopher, said, if it's hard to talk about something, then you have to be silent. Some things you can't talk about. Okay, so you shut up for a while. Maybe in another 20 years I will have a better idea to answer your questions, It takes some time.
Let's hope by then this conflict would have been resolved. Well, Bernd, it's really a great pleasure to have you and to have even made your acquaintance.
Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you very much.